Today is Thursday, September 26th, 2024. We're still in a month of Elul, which is the month preceding, here we go, is the month preceding Rosh Hashanah and all the high holy days. And so we have a lot to think about. And I know that I hope that you have a lot of questions and you have a lot of comments about this book. We're discussing Lisa Barr's The Goddess of Warsaw. And I thought it was well written, and the story, although a Holocaust story, had a lot of surprises at the end, a lot of good twists at the end, and kept me reading. And I read part of it and I listened to part of it, and I just thought it was well done. Did you like the book, and do you think she was the goddess of Warsaw? Susan Wellick, go.
Well, I have to say, I read this book before I had read it like a year ago.
Yeah.
So I had to do a little bit of rereading to get ready and I think the woman, the goddess of Warsaw, Lena, or whatever we want to call her, Bina, she had so many names, but in the beginning, she was just doing anything she had to do to survive. And then as time goes on, she becomes full of revenge. And it was like her whole purpose in life. And she was willing to take chances and to sacrifice herself in many ways in order to get revenge on the people that had brought so much misery to her, her family, and her people. And at the end, she gets the ultimate revenge. And
She does.
And even though she's in prison, she's happy.
Yeah.
And it seems like she's happy for the first time in her life.
Yeah.
With all this vengefulness that she felt.
Yeah.
And who could blame her?
Who could blame her? And I think when you look at those stories of the Holocaust and the no food, all of that stuff, for me, I see echoes of it in October 7th, and the hostages still in Gaza, not eating, and we have no idea what's happening with them, and the trauma that Israel has gone through, and the trauma that Holocaust survivors have gone through is great. I forgot, I usually at least show you a picture. Lisa Barr, lives here in Chicago. She's really lovely. And all right. There she is.
She lives in Deerfield.
Right.
Her mother is a good friend, and I just really applaud all the research that has gone into this.
Yes. Among the highlights of her career, Lisa covered the famous handshake between the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the late PLO leader Yasser Arafat and President Clinton at the White House. She's been featured on Good Morning America and Today. And Sharon Stone, oh, that's Woman on Fire. She has a lot of she has some other books, and I recommend them. A lot of them are based in the Holocaust, and I apologize that next month's book, The Little Liar, also Holocaust. So we have this woman who goes through this amazing life, and then I was shocked at the end, when she went up to that Nazi, and he was the mole, and how they they hid him. I thought that was very shocking. I thought it was very heartwarming that the little girl she saved became this beautiful artist. And that was the, that was beautiful. I also think that having listened to many, many Holocaust survivor stories and read that luck and happenstance happened to a lot of survivors. Why did I survive? It could have gone either way. And I think that it is just very truthful, not truthful. I think it could have happened because it was, it was really luck sometimes for people who survived. I have some questions, which I'll get to in a hot minute here, but any other opening statements about the book?
I think that you carry trauma throughout your life. And there's a real fine line between what was justice and what was revenge.
Yeah.
And so she's a fictional character, probably based on a million people who live that life.
Yes.
Oh.
And what did you think of that Alexander, the brother-in-law, he ends up, living with his first wife had been killed, but the second wife, and they had kids, and he really had a happy ending. I think Susan is right in prison, that, Lena, or whatever we're gonna call her, was happy in prison, but Alexander really got the happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the novel is filled with empowered female characters. Bina, Zelda, oh, I love Zelda, Anna, Sienna. How does each woman use her power to impact the plot and affect others while defining her own path? What do you think? What did they do? And you can start with Lena. Merle.
I think all of them were trying to prove that Jews do not have to be victims. The Jews can be proactive in fighting. And what Lena had said, which I thought kind of sums it up, is that she wanted to kill the people who had made it their mission to crush our existence. And it was just step by step, very well planned. And she did it. And she got several of the Nazis in the United States and found them and killed them. And it was just so, I mean, not that we would want people to kill each other, but it was so heartwarming in these cases that she was able to do it because they had been so cruel to her family, her father, and the scene where she's pulled off the stage because she's a Jew after a wonderful performance. It was just such a heartwarming story, satisfying that the Jews were not victims in this.
In
I
some
don't know if
cases,
I'd say
murder is justified.
heartwarming, Merle, but satisfying. Rana, what were you going to say?
So murder's justified?
See, that's the question. Is it justified? I mean, if we look at the great Nazi hunter, Simon Wiesenthal, he brought a lot of these Nazis to justice, and they were put in prison, and some are still in prison or died in prison. But was that murder? Was it justified?
He didn't go out and murder them.
Pardon? No, he did
go
not.
out and murder
not.
them.
No.
He
Andy.
brought them to justice.
Yep.
Oh, in a Jewish ethics class that I've taken down in my little community here, we were taught in war, murder is justified. So I believe any of the murders that took place by Lena, the freedom fighters, that was war. That was war. Anything then was justified.
What about later?
Yeah,
During-
what about later, Andy?
No, no, there's not. Certainly understandable, certainly makes for a great read, but no. if that's the case, who decides the right from wrong? That's why we're a nation with a constitution and due process, and put them on trial.
Yeah.
Do what's necessary there. No, I don't think it's justified. Although you go, yes, because this book read like a movie. And as Paul
Yes.
always said, would this be a good movie? I
Absolutely.
listened to it and it was like a movie with all the
Right.
fast pace. But no,
Absolutely like a movie.
not justified. No.
Was anyone else shocked? I was surprised that Havel was not her father, but that terrible Nazi was her father.
This is
Yeah.
the-
That was, yeah. Lorelai or Jamie, did you have something?
Oh, I just said that that was definitely a surprise. Did
Yeah.
not expect.
Yeah, and she was embarrassed. I mean, all these things that they were doing, and that, she killed him before he could say, "I'm your father," and her, being able to pass so easily, makes even more sense. Makes even more sense, and she wielded her beauty in, very strategic ways. And, what did you feel about that?
But I just wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah,
It-
Belinda,
it
go
made-
ahead.
It made no difference to him that she was his daughter.
Oh, yeah.
She was just a Jew to him.
He was a psychopath. And I kept thinking about, when she finally realized that was her father, that the last words her father heard was his mother saying his name,
Right.
stop it, stop it. Yeah. Paula, then Susan.
I was thinking, for that era, the casting couch, the way women got ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not an unusual path to success. She obviously had talent that was greater than just her beauty and her sexual prowess.
Yeah.
But she was an ultimate manipulator. She knew what to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
I think they all used their strengths, whatever their strength was, or whatever people perceived as. I mean, it was very transactional.
And at that
Very
time,
transactional, yes.
closeted homosexuals, all the people who couldn't live their authentic lives.
Yeah, that was also, yeah.
A sub
S-
story, you know.
Yeah, Susan, then Meryl. Susan?
So I have a question regarding her actual, who is really her father. Even though it wasn't her fault that he was her biological father, I think she may have carried a bit of guilt about that. Because how could she be the daughter of a Nazi? And it made her feel guilty, I think. And I think that also had something to do with the revenge that she was looking for, was
Yeah.
her guilt.
Yeah.
She had to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, Susan.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That,
Well, I mean, she was certainly ashamed and,
Yes.
by it.
yeah, she was ashamed. She killed him before he could say that. And I mean, that's definitely, I think, why she killed him right there, because that wasn't the plan. They were supposed to do something with him. And absolutely, absolutely.
Well, also
Again,
the piece about the anger at her mother.
yes.
Yeah.
Can only imagine. Merle?
I think Lena evolved from the time we first met her. She was trying so hard to be a part of the resistance. And then when she did get into the resistance, Zelda became her role model. And Zelda had said to everyone, revenge is redemption. And I think she took that as her motto very, very literally, that is every time I commit an act of revenge against these people, I am redeeming us. We are saving ourselves, and it's an act of goodness. And I think that became her motto, her mantra. That was that.
I have done a lot of studying about the Holocaust, and even though this is fiction, the timeline presents that all of the real stories we have of the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi, on and on and on, they were teenagers. They were teenagers, and as was Lena. And so I think, she became stuck in, maybe we know now the prefrontal cortex, wasn't developed, her brain wasn't developed, and she couldn't get out of that mindset. And Jerzy Kaczynski, and when you look at all of their, we didn't have any old people who survived. I mean, maybe there were some, but the majority of the the majority of Holocaust stories that we have are from teenagers. And you have to take that into consideration as you listen to the story, their viewpoints, and look, she was very caught up in the romance with the brother-in-law. She couldn't disentangle herself from that, even at the very end. And so that's something that I always think about, especially when I read, there's true memoirs. Rana.
Did anybody ever think, would I do that?
Yeah, I do all the time. Anne Frank, there's a fabulous short story by Nathan Englander, and he's a little out there, and I may read it in my short story class eventually, but he has the name of the book, and the name of the story is What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank. And what we talk about is who would hide us? What would I do? And I think, and certainly in, we're all of an age that I don't know, I can't help but think about it. I read Anne Frank in 6th grade, in the early 1970s, and and I was the only Jewish kid in the class, and everyone was coming to me, including the teacher, like I was the expert, which when I was 12, I was not. And it frightened me. And I wonder, how the kids today look at it. But I think that we do think about it. And I think as the Holocaust survivors begin dying off, and I just saw that a survivor from the ghetto in Lodz, the last survivor just died, there's going to be more and more and more and more stories. Paula.
I think your point is so well taken about the adolescent brain, because it operates on lack of impulse control.
Here. And I think her character, had lack of impulse control.
And libido. It also operates on libido.
Yes,
And
you
hormones.
are correct. Yeah.
Even at 92 in a prison.
Right. Oi. Yeah, let me go
Well,
back.
then it's about, are you willing to do whatever it takes to survive? And a lot of people were not.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah.
It's so hard to know what any of us would feel like in that situation, and I hope we never do.
I hope we never do either. Andy.
I wonder about the scene when Lena gave all of those suicide pills to those girls.
Oh, yeah.
And that one scene as difficult as it was, that seemed almost inconceivable to me. That, how old was she then? 19, I don't know,
A
I think
teenager.
19, yeah.
something like that, to give these young girls that choice
Yeah.
and to convince them. That was so heartbreaking. And I don't know if that was, I wanted to raise, was that based on anything true that we know of?
I don't think so, and I tried to look and, it's something we should ask Lisa Barr. She did a lot of research for this, obviously, but I don't know if that was true. I forgot, I lost my train of thought. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I have another question for you. In the Warsaw Ghetto, in the majority of wartime situations, women are unsung heroes. Why? And how does this book change this? How does it change it? Merle.
I kept comparing her to Anne Frank, how Anne Frank was a hero in her own way, a heroine as a child by keeping the diary, and it was something that lasted forever. But she was hidden and closeted and put away and never got out. And Lena was the opposite. Lena got out no matter how she was able to do it. She brought food through the sewers to people. And when she got out, she assumed this identity because she looked blonde as an Aryan woman. And she really became a very sarcastic kind of killer, because as she killed these people, she said to them, with love from the Warsaw Ghetto. So she took on this amazing persona as she got stronger and stronger and had this mission. So I think that's really what was very different about her from the other women, the women who were unsung, because she became known, she became an actress, and at the end, they knew who she was.
Yes.
I think the women are the unsung heroes because they're the ones that stay brave and they keep everything together and they find a way to feed their family out of a fourth of a cabbage and a potato and, just keep everyone going. And I think that's why they're all very heroic.
Go ahead, Rana.
There was, I read a book recently and I cannot remember the name of it, but it was about women, the nurses in Vietnam.
Oh, the women.
It's
Women.
just called The Women.
Yeah.
Okay. And, when they got out, women didn't fight. You can't come to the VA. You weren't in the war.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good book.
Great book. And it reminded me of that.
Well, I mean, women's contributions in every area have been overlooked and, belittled throughout time.
Yeah. So two things. One, I think it's very hard to be the children of a Holocaust survivor, because you can never, you think to yourself, my parents had to live through X, Y, and Z. I have a very dear friend, and both of his parents were partisans. They were in Poland. And I think it's just hard to think about the starvation and what they went through. They have story after story after story. Lisa and Aaron Derman. And Lisa was blonde, and she looks Polish, and she didn't look Jewish, and had the same advantage that Lena did. So I think that as the Holocaust, as our survivors die and their kids take up the gauntlet and begin telling these stories, it'll be interesting how they perceive it. Sandy.
I don't know if any of you have read the books that Estelle Laughlin wrote, but she was a survivor of the ghetto. She and her sister, I believe they were in, I'm not sure which camps, but a couple of them. And they both survived while everyone else in their family was put to death. And her sister, wrote books too. She lived in New York, but Estelle lived here. I believe she wound up in Deerfield at the end. And I visited her, I talked to her just a few weeks ago, and then she died the next day.
Mm.
So she died about 2 weeks ago, but she was a wonderful speaker at the Holocaust Museum. And the Clinton, I think, took her to several countries. She went and spoke in Europe and everything. She must have been a very attractive, blonde Jewish woman in Poland and a lovely person. So I just said that, telling you as a tribute to her, because
Yeah.
she did something all these years. She spoke, at every school that would have her. I mean, she just didn't stop.
Yeah.
She spent so many years of her life speaking about the Holocaust, teaching
don't know.
children.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember when she started speaking, but when the survivors, came to America, people didn't talk about the Holocaust. And their Jewish families welcomed them, and certainly the Jewish community, highest Hebrew Immigrant and Aid Society, we settled all these people here. But it wasn't until, I want to say, the late 70s and the 80s when people started talking about the Holocaust. And one watershed event was a mini series, and mini series were big, Roots, and this was one called Holocaust.
Yeah.
And Meryl Streep might have been in it. I mean, it had a lot of really good actors. And it was late, it must have been 78. And I was at college. We did not have a TV in every room, as I believe is, that's what's happening today. And I went to University of Michigan, and there was a ton of Jewish kids, and we all sat in our whatever, the lobby of the dorm and watched this together. I will never forget that. And the Dermans came for the first time to talk to a college class as partisans, telling how they resisted. So I think that, again, as moderns, and speaking in 2024, and our kids, if they grew up and went to a religious school or Solomon Schechter Day School, they saw survivors all the time, because these people, as Sandy said, once they started talking, they spoke everywhere. And one of the Evie, did you have a question, comment?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that as the only child of an only survivor, it was very painful to not be able to talk about it, because I went to a Jewish day school, and it was never brought up. It was never discussed, and it was just very, very lonely, not having anybody to share, to ask, to commiserate with. So I can appreciate the breadth of time that kicks in to be able to talk about it. And I remember when Yom HaShoah became a thing, and we were in our early days at Solel, I resented it. What are all these people talking about? What is this big whatever, and so forth? It took me a while to understand it. And I certainly, have done a turnaround and worked on it for a number of years, but it's a process. And I think the people that are reflecting now, on October 7th, it's going to be a long period too, to be able to have conversations about it, or even deal with the emotions, or get beyond it, or even put any kind of a frame around it. So I can understand that. So I just wanted to say.
I totally agree with you, and thank you for sharing that. Merle?
Well, one thing about Lena that was also different from other people, she told the producers and directors, I will sign this contract, but there will be no crying. I will not cry in a movie. And I thought it was a very powerful statement on her part. How many people would give an actress a contract that says no crying, because it's something that's required in so many roles? But she had a lot of power. And I thought,
She did.
the question is, why did she insist in having contracts that said no crying? Why?
I think she was afraid if she cried, it would unleash all her demons.
Agreed. And I don't,
I thought
know,
she was,
la-
I
the
thought
last,
she,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
because of her trauma, I thought she was unable to cry.
Right.
Yeah. And that the last time she cried was when she was in the ghetto and, you know, the girls and all these other terrible things. The other reason that I don't want to say enjoy, but that I think that this is an important story is that it shows a little bit of the resistance and what Jews did to resist. And again, I have brought in speakers yearly on Yom HaShoah, survivors. And I remember once we got a question of, why didn't they fight back? Why didn't they? And, that question irks me because we cannot go back into the mind of somebody during World War II. We cannot, there was no state of Israel. We're looking at this with a modern eye and there's a different world configuration. And just by living, that's how Jews resisted. And I think the speaker took care of it, but I really had to put a clamp on me because it's just not an equivalency that you can make. You can't say that. And I knew when the story got to the Warsaw Ghetto and they were going to fight back. And they said, oh, it'll be over in 1 or 2 days. I knew that it went on for a month. And you can see, that, it felt good that we were able to resist that long. And of course, again, most of the people died. Now, they did find diaries and they did find papers. So Yaakov, Lena's husband's, that stuff coming to light is again based on. Let's see. Here's another question for you. Zelda says, once you decide you are no longer a lamb, but a wolf, everything changes. What does she mean by this, and how does this impact Bina's journey? Why is Zelda the voice in Bina's head? Rana.
Because up until that moment, she was like most of the other Jews that just accepted their fate.
Yeah.
And assumed that there was nothing that could be done.
Yeah.
And that's when she decided that's not true. If there's anything I can do, I will do it.
Yes.
It was her knowing Zelda was transformative for her. She inspired her with her bravery and her completely different perspective, as you said, basically said.
But that goes back to your question, Vanessa. Why didn't they all join the resistance?
Well, the historical answer to that question is this. For thousands of years, not hundreds, thousands of years, the Jews in Europe had got along with the non-Jews and the Christians by going along with them and being, the court Jews and giving them the money. And they just had no other example of how to fight back until they did. Lynn, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say they just had no idea that anything like this would ever happen. And that because they felt so part of the community before it all occurred, they just couldn't believe that something like this would happen in their country. And that's really what held them back. They didn't have the right perspective on what the possibilities were.
Well,
Just
who could really
They were living the
conceive?
possibility.
Who could
Yes.
conceive
Well, who could
of the
conceive of-
extent of what happened, of the
Well, but then compare that to Israel now. Who could conceive that something
could
like that would
conceive?
happen? It's been all this time, and
What
that's
about-
not something you would ever expect.
Except that there's
Phyllis,
not
did
an
you want-
Israeli that won't fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phyllis, did you want to say something?
I did. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I couldn't help but think I love this book. I thought it was a page turner. I couldn't
It
put
was
it
a
in.
page turn.
But there were pieces of it when they were having meetings and throughout the whole thing, some of it was a little too reminiscent of what is going on in this country today with anti-Semitism. Some of it is, why aren't more people speaking against it? Why? There's a lot of whys in there. And I think what's scary about that is that the German Jews and the Polish Jews, nobody thought anything could happen to them because that was their country. And which American doesn't feel that way? Nothing can happen to me. I live in this state. I've been in this country for all these generations. And it doesn't matter what cars they drive, what temples they go to, none of it. And it's very eerie to me and scary that I finished this book and thought it ought to be mandatory reading in high school.
Yeah.
Because it was so clear.
Yeah. So I would say the mandatory book should be Elie Wiesel's Night. But
it
because
is.
it is.
yeah,
I think they do read that.
Seventh grade. Evie and then Sandy. Evie, did you want to say something?
Say the flashback when you were talking about the fact that she had not crying in her contract. I think that it was almost a testimony to what she learned from Zelda, because otherwise that any tearing would put her in a victim scenario or view.
Yeah. It would make her look weak.
Yes, she became a wolf as opposed to a lamb.
Yes,
going forward.
absolutely. Sandy. Wait, let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Sandy.
This is not from the book, but it carries some of the themes we're talking about. After some years, when people got out of the camps and they went to Israel, people knew who the capos were. And if you were a capo, and that's similar to these people that worked for the Nazis, the capos were mostly the ones who worked around the extermination camps, and rounded up people and did all kinds of terrible things, collaborators. But
I would say they were collaborators, and I'll talk a little bit about the Judenrat in a minute, but go ahead.
Okay, but they in Israel, I remember the man across the street from my house was considered, people whispered about it. As soon as I moved there, the neighbors would tell you who was this and who was that. But the man across the street from me, they said was a capo. And they used to tell me that he beat his son mercilessly. He had 2 sons and he only beat one of them. And the boy, he was a very nice young man. He was in maybe 30 when I met him, but everybody knew that the father, he had this instinct in him to be cruel. And another thing, I can't remember the man's name, but this is a famous true story. There was a man who worked, I believe it was the Hungarians, because the Hungarian Jews were about the last to really suffer. And I can't remember the name. Maybe you know the man's name, but he was known for keeping the lists and, sending people on trains and leaving others off. And after the war, the Israeli government went after him and he was punished. He was, his name was famous. I can't remember the name, but it's just like people do terrible things. Look at, this is a totally different example, but the guys who did the Munich killing of the Israeli athletes, Israel didn't let that go. They spent about 10 or 20 years, and the Mossad got every single one of those killers.
Yeah. Listen, again, we live in a different reality within Israel. And the Judenrat, and we're going to discuss this even more in The Little Liar. This was, the Germans put a Jewish consul in charge of everyone. And one of the things that happened was that the great leaders started out in the Judenrat, and then when they had to send people, they refused and were killed. So towards the end of the war, you had these Jews, Judenrat, who, were not the best leaders, were terrible people, and, used it to stay alive, and they weren't good leaders. So that's something that you have to think about. Zelda, of course, was part of the resistance, and she, got the all of the weapons, and when you think about how little they had to fight the Nazis back, for a month, it's absolutely
Something froze.
Pardon?
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible.
They had to be so creative.
Yes, yes,
with
yes,
what they had to work with.
yes. Lena Browning has many lovers, though only one true love, a forbidden love with the brother-in-law. How does this destroy everything around her? Why was Bina to blame and banished from the ghetto and not Alexander as well? Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, well, that's an old story.
Yeah, right. As old as time, as we say, as Disney would say, yeah.
Right.
Right.
As old as time.
Right. And we're not going to get into politics, but there's a lot been made of childless women with cats. But the party that said that has not said anything about childless men. So yeah.
Well, he did mention Pete Buttigieg.
Oh, people.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Who has two adopted children.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, she really took the fall for that, and we see it played out in her life with taking, lover after lover, and she, that was her love.
Well, she wasn't looking anymore for a conventional type of happiness.
Right.
I think, every survivor had to decide, how they would stay alive afterwards, like what their life would look like. And they had some philosophy. And for her, she picked this path of, revenge is redemption. And it's like she made a deal. So she was willing to give up things in order to get what she wanted. That's why when she was in prison, she was okay with it. You know,
Yeah.
she had made her deal.
Yeah. It takes extraordinary circumstances to survive war, atrocity, and brutality. Lena justifies her violent past to the young actress, Sienna Hayes, maintaining she is an avenger and not a psychopath. Survival, and this is a quote, survival is either in him or me. It always comes down to a choice, never a compromise. It is those things that one would never do that one must do to survive. Do you agree with that? And or was she a psychopath? Merle?
I love the way she kept redefining survival. And she said in this one part, survival is not heroic, it is ugly. And then explains what she means. She says the 10-block radius of the sealed ghetto once had 400,000 Jews, 30% of Warsaw's population, the largest Jewish community in Europe. And 99% of the children were gone, 60% of the Jews remained, but so many Jews were killed. So survival has many different meanings in this story. And I think for Lena, it's true that survival was just ugly. She had so many dark memories of what she did in order to survive. And I thought this really redefined survival for me, because I always thought survival is great. Whatever you have to go through, at least you survived. But this was a redefinition of survival.
When I taught Holocaust and when I taught it to, students, I would say to them, when they rounded up everyone and put them in the Warsaw ghetto, that was like where, that wasn't where all the rich Jews lived. It would be like taking everyone from Highland Park and Deerfield and taking them down to West Rogers Park and, putting 20 people into a little bungalow, or 40 or however many people into a room, and so on and so forth. And I think it's very hard to think about what that life would mean. And I think it's hard. And I think that the Holocaust Museum in DC, Yad Vashem, and even our Skokie Museum has tried to shine a light on what was life like before the Holocaust, that they had normal lives, rich lives, rich in love and family and money. And that's very hard to it's hard to think about that, and it's something I think it's very important to teach our kids.
And also, Vanessa, they were also very well educated, and they were talented and cultured.
Yes.
I mean, there were doctors, lawyers, artists of all kinds. These were not a bunch of ne'er-do-wells.
Right. Oh, and when she kills that one scientist, though that's based on true stories. They let a lot of Nazi scientists out.
True. That's true.
Because they wanted them to help work on the atom bomb or whatever. Now, they also got Jews out, but the Jews had not done anything wrong, whereas the Nazis had.
Yeah.
And that was an absolutely true storyline.
That's horrific. That's horrific. I didn't know that part of the horrible history that.
Yeah. And
that was like the Nazi scientists were a major part of our space program.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer, Werner von Braun. I mean, these
Werner
guys.
Braun. Oppenheimer was Jewish.
Yeah, but no, the whole story was about all the space people were Germans that they had extracted from Germany, Nazis that they had extracted because of their minds.
Yes, absolutely. And just let them off scot-free. Absolutely scot-free. Because the Germans knew that they were scientists, and literal rocket scientist, but the Germans realized their value and, they came here and,
And
Got
our
away with
State
it.
Department really didn't care. They
Oh.
didn't care.
Sandy is correct. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the State Department. Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Otherwise, they would have done much more.
Mhm.
And at first, I don't think people really understood what had happened to the Jews. So as the regime, the Third Reich was collapsing and some of these people were fleeing, Americans certainly did not believe or understand that there had been this mass genocide.
Well, that's the average American, but the people in the government knew by then.
Eisenhower made,
you know.
Eisenhower made it known as much as possible. And then he even forced the people, the non-Jews who lived around the camps, to come in and look and see what was there.
Yeah. I remember a terrible argument with a college roommate who was a germophile. She studied there. She goes, Vanessa, they didn't know what was happening. And I said, you're wrong. They could smell it. They knew what was happening. Don't tell me they didn't know. She goes, oh no, they had no idea. And I to this day, I don't believe that. And I think, listen, the Poles for sure were complicit in sending their neighbors away and moving into their houses and taking their riches. Sue.
So there's no way these people did not know. I remember years ago taking the train in Germany to go to Dachau, to the camp. And when you get off the train there's houses right there. They knew what was happening. There's no way they didn't see what was going on behind those fences. They absolutely knew.
Yeah, I agree. Phyllis?
Yes.
Did you have
No, I really didn't at this moment.
Okay. All right, let's go back to that question. Do you think that Lena was a psychopath?
I don't.
I don't either.
Yes.
No,
No.
I definitely don't.
I
Yeah,
think
She said,
I mean, she was extremely traumatized.
Traumatized and damaged.
Yeah, and damaged, right, but
Mhm.
not a psychopath.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I mean,
she
who
said,
among
"It's
us
him or me."
isn't flawed?
and if you were faced with that, could you do that? Could you shoot somebody? Him or you?
Right.
Yeah, I
I
could.
don't know. Yeah, I
I
think
have
about
a
that. Andy.
I have a bit of a contrary opinion. I think
Okay.
during the war, she was fighting for survival. After the war, there was a number of things she could have done to get justice, to seek out and physically murder people, a number of people. If it were some white guy with a hood, we'd say he's a psychopath. Because I have to say, to a certain extent, she was traumatized. She had post-war
It's
syndrome.
murdering guilty people, though. I'm not saying it was exactly right, but I meant you can't compare it to someone in the Ku Klux Klan.
Well, it's vigilantism, really, is what she was doing.
She was doing vigilante, and I think
Mhm.
whether she knew the difference between right and wrong and
Mhm.
chose to do what she believed was right. I don't know. I don't think she was of a healthy mind.
No.
If I were arguing to defend her, I would argue that she was a psychopath and probably could make a case that
I
she
also don't-
was.
I also
I
don't
thought
think
that was a
she thought about
fascinating.
right and wrong, because I don't think she felt what she was doing was wrong.
Wrong.
So she wasn't making a choice between right and wrong. She was doing what she knew she needed or wanted to do.
She had
And
a
it
mi-
was right for her. So-
And the people she was killing were guilty.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But does that make it right? Simon Wiesenthal, who my late father had a great affinity for and gave him a lot of money. He brought them to trial. He didn't go out and shoot them all. So,
I don't know. I think of a psychopath in a different way. She had a capacity for love. She had a capacity, I mean, she knew right from wrong. She had to carry this out for her own mental survival.
mhm, mhm.
Does it make it right? No, of course it wasn't right, but I don't think she was a psychopath.
And she
Nothing
was
was
also
right.
okay with the consequence. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
But didn't
absolutely.
you feel, but didn't you feel it was the right thing for her to do? I mean, it really felt good to hear her doing that stuff. So, that's why it's so interesting when you talk about it like that.
Right. I mean, again, I
Well, it
thought-
made for a better novel.
Yes, absolutely.
yes, it did. Merle, go ahead.
She really defends herself at the end of the book. She said, Zelda wanted the world to know that we stood up, fought against our fate, determined to change the outcome no matter the consequences. Revenge wins battles, but love wins wars. What did I win in the end? Peace of mind, perhaps.
Yeah.
So,
And Alexander chose love.
Yes, he did.
Yes,
Chose love and,
he chose
that,
a totally different path.
yes.
I mean, that stood out, that was part of the scene that, near the end was a contrast between their choices, between their lives.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a great book. There was a lot of twists and turns that I did not anticipate. And again, next month we're doing The Little Liar. Again, Holocaust, but the Greek experience. It's by Mitch Albloom. I'll send out an email tomorrow, and we're meeting on, I brought it up here, Thursday, October 24th. And it's the last day of Sukkot. And I'm sure it'll be nice and cold and rainy, and because it always rains on Sukkot. But that's another book for another time. It's great seeing everyone. There's a lot going on at Macomb. If you have any questions, see me. And I just look forward to seeing everybody in person.
Be well.
Say
everybody.
October 24th.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Happy New Year.
Yes.
Shana
Shana
Tova.
Tova to everybody. Happy, healthy New Year.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
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 Yes,
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank